Officer Jonas had spent years patrolling the city streets with a deep commitment to his work and a heart burdened by the past. For him, his badge wasn't just a symbol of authority, it was a reminder of a purpose he once had and of a tragedy he still carried. Years ago, when his daughter was barely a toddler, she had been taken from him in a human trafficking ring that he had chased tirelessly, only for the trail to run cold. That loss became a haunting ache, one that lingered even after his wife succumbed to illness. A pain that grew deeper with the passing years, a pain he hid beneath a professional exterior. But every night, Jonas remembered his little girl, her laughter, her tiny hands, and the necklace he had given her, a necklace that had been lost with her. He had imagined 1,000 times what it would have been like to see her again, but he'd long since learned to quiet such thoughts, resigning to the emptiness they left behind. One afternoon, Jonas was stationed at his desk when a call came in. A young girl on the other end of the line whispered for help, her voice barely audible, a plea that conveyed both fear and desperation. She mentioned being mistreated by her mother, Gina, saying she was beaten for the smallest reasons and treated as a maid. Jonas's heart twisted at the familiar strain in her voice, another child suffering in silence. He asked for the address, promising he'd be there as quickly as possible. When he arrived, Jonas could feel the tension in the air before he even knocked. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, but through a small crack in the front window, he could see a young girl approaching the door. She opened it slowly, looking up at him with wide, wary eyes, and the sight of her stopped Jonas in his tracks. The girl had marks on her face, bruises that told their own story. But it wasn't only that. Something about her face, her eyes, her expression, was strikingly familiar, pulling at memories he thought he'd buried. And there, around her neck, hung a small necklace, one he recognized immediately. It was the same design he'd given his daughter years ago, the same necklace that had been lost along with her. Jonas could barely speak, his voice caught in his throat as his eyes filled with tears. He knelt down and asked her gently, "Where did you get that necklace?" The girl hesitated, confusion and fear flickering across her face. She glanced down at the necklace, touching it as if it were her only anchor. "A worker at the homeless shelter gave it to me," she replied softly. "He helped children like me. Children who had been lost," he said. "He helped me find a family, but—" Her voice broke, as if the weight of the truth was too heavy to carry alone. Jonas's heart pounded as he pieced together her words. Slowly, he took out his wallet, pulling out a worn, faded photograph he'd carried for 8 years. The little girl in the picture had the same gentle eyes, the same necklace. Jonas held it up for her, his hands trembling. The girl looked at the picture, recognition dawning slowly, and as she looked back at him, her own eyes began to fill with tears. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely above her breath, as though saying it too loudly might shatter the fragile moment. "Yes," Jonas said, his voice breaking as he gathered her into his arms. "It's me. I thought I'd lost you forever, but here you are." Tears streamed down his face as he held her close, a lifetime's worth of sorrow, relief, and joy overwhelming him. They stayed like that, holding each other in silence, each coming to terms with the miracle of their reunion. When they finally parted, Jonas brushed a hand over her face, taking in the bruises with a growing anger. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice low and protective. Helena, her true name, which she didn't yet know, looked away, hesitant to answer. "The woman who adopted me, Gina. She didn't like how I looked. She never called me her daughter. She'd make me clean, cook, do everything. And if I made a mistake—" Jonas clenched his fists, the officer in him rising to the surface. He was no longer just a father rediscovering his child, he was a man on a mission to protect her. "She won't hurt you anymore. I'm here now, and I'll make sure she pays for what she's done." A few minutes later, Gina returned home, finding Jonas standing in the doorway with Helena by his side. Her expression shifted from surprise to disdain as she looked at the scene unfolding before her. Jonas didn't waste time. He introduced himself, showing his badge and explaining the accusations against her. Gina tried to justify herself, but her excuses fell flat. Jonas placed her under arrest. "You've violated the rights of a child, and now you'll answer for it. You won't get away with this." After ensuring Gina was detained, Jonas went through every legal avenue to secure custody of Helena. The process took time, but he was relentless, determined to ensure that she would never again be subjected to abuse. When he finally brought her home, their new home, Jonas knelt beside her, looking at her with a gentle smile. "I know you've been through so much," he said softly, "but you're safe now. I'll tell you everything you want to know about your past, about your mother. She was the kindest woman I ever knew. She would have loved you as much as I do." Helena nodded, her small hand clutching his, and together they began to build a new life. For Jonas, the emptiness that had weighed on him for years finally began to lift. Each day brought new memories, laughter, and healing. Jonas knew he had been given a second chance, not just to be a father, but to give his daughter the life she deserved. Their bond grew stronger, built on love, resilience, and the unbreakable connection between a father and his daughter. And as the years passed, they looked forward to a future filled with hope, joy, and the knowledge that they would always have each other.